Before we begin, thank you very much to the man who has your animated Optimus Prime for joining the Patreon campaign. I hope that means like in an eBay purchase way and not a I'm holding him ransom way. It'd be a very weird way of delivering a hostage message, but nevertheless, thank you very much for the support, always appreciated. So, if you are watching this on Thursday, the day it goes up, this is my reminder. We are doing a weekly live D&D campaign on Twitch over at the Goblins channel. I will leave the link in the description below. We just finished our first arc, which was a big pirate romp adventure, and now next up, we are moving to a new location. It's a good jumping on point if you want to get into like the antics, because it's a pretty wild game. A lot of fun. So please come watch if you haven't. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. I will post it on the socials when we go live. So we have an age-old debate to discuss today in the video. So this one is classic. This one is classic. To the point where, like, me approaching video number 800 in a row, I'm kind of amazed I haven't touched on this. I had to double check my channel. Like, really? I haven't? Because I've been wanting to do this for like over a year and I've never gotten around to it. So we're looking at the Constructicons today, specifically the ones from the Generation 1 cartoon, because they are some of the most frustrating characters to actually explain. Not on a Prowl 2 level, don't get me wrong, but these guys are still really annoying to figure out because apparently nobody at Sunbow doing any kind of writing for G1 was actually looking at the character Bible. So let's actually go over this. We're looking into the origins of the Constructicons. Now, if your G1 fiction comes from the Marvel Comics, well, don't worry. That's pretty easy. Shockwave created them using the creation matrix. Wasn't really that hard. And frankly, most continuities since then have just said, yeah, Constructicons are here. They're just a group. They don't really need an origin story or an explanation. They just are. If at most, some continuities might explain the combining ability, like IDW did with the Enigma of Combination, because that is a unique and unknown ability. Something that they kind of like quantify in different ways. So that's where the story is, not the origin itself. So comic book wise, the origins are pretty cut and dry. There's nothing really weird or mysterious about them. We have to look at the G1 cartoon today though, and we know stories get messy there. So the first episode is Heavy Metal War. This is the very first appearance of the Constructicons as a team. It happens in season 1. And Megatron explains that while they're actually in like a temporary base in a set of caverns, and he mentions when the Constructicons return to him, he mentions that it was worth building them in these caverns, indicating that they were constructed on Earth. Okay, fair enough. Then we get to season 2 and the secret of Omega Supreme, and you find out the Constructicons were actually on Cybertron. That they were friends with Omega Supreme. They weren't evil until Megatron used a machine to forcibly reprogram them. They didn't even have a Devastator mode until Megatron rebuilt them with that combination ability included. You know, they were the creators of the Crystal City and the destroyers of the Crystal City. So this was a complete continuity gap, right? So now we have two completely divergent origins for the Constructicons. One that has them built on Earth, and another one that sets them, not really pre-war, but like in the early days of the war, certainly, on Cybertron. And then we have another wrinkle in Season 3, Five Faces of Darkness Part 4, where Megatron is seen being built from, within the memories of past Autobot leaders in the Matrix. And there's a crew of Constructicons there too. Okay, we have three origins that we now have to figure out. So this has always confounded Transformer fans. Everyone's got their own headcanon explanation. And I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. I do not think I'm the first one to come up with this actual conclusion, this solution to the Constructicon conundrum. But I do feel like it's worth saying, right? Just for the people who haven't been paying attention or the ones who haven't really expressed it before. So we've got a lot of continuity gaps to kind of explain away, and a few things we need to get in touch with just so we can establish a few things before we go into the deep connections and how to make sense of all of this. So, for starters, we have to explain Devastator himself. He does appear during Heavy Metal War, and you wouldn't think this is an important detail, but there is a detail about this that is important, and that's the fact that the only ones surprised by the sight of Devastator are the Dinobots, who are built on Earth and never experienced Cybertron, and Spike, who is right to be surprised at the size and combination look of the Constructicons. No one else is really shocked by the appearance of Devastator. The Autobots just kind of drive right by the fight with the Dinobots because storyline-wise at the time they couldn't interfere. And then when it came time to actually handle Devastator themselves, they did so without any real worry. Optimus Prime seemed like he knew exactly what he was doing in order to disable Devastator, indicating that this might be something that they've handled before, or at the very least they were prepared for. So I don't really see, though this part actually does play a significant role here because it does establish that the origin on Cybertron has some credibility, just by the fact that no one's really shocked by the fact that these Transformers could combine, which at the time was the first time we'd ever seen it happen. But they seemed like they already knew it was a thing. The other thing to think about here is during the Secret of Omega Supreme, we actually see the Constructicons in Earth mode on Cybertron. This is more or less just a gaffe of animation because they didn't have Cybertronian alt modes, but what you see on screen is what's being depicted, so we have to treat it as canonical. Fortunately, there is a convenient explanation for this. Because remember, the Secret of Omega Supreme is an episode where Omega Supreme is recounting his past with the Constructicons to Optimus Prime. Meaning, what we're seeing is how Prime is imagining this situation being described to him. And the only frame of reference he has for what the Constructicons look like is how he's experienced them on Earth. So the fact that they are in Earth mode, and even the fact that they are wearing Decepticon symbols in the flashback, actually does lend credit to the actual, situation of the episode. So that all makes sense. It seems like a continuity gaffe. It's really not. Not if you think about it the right way. Now, in comparison, in Five Faces of Darkness, we have to take this as literal, because we're not looking at Rodimus Prime's imagination filling in the gaps of the story he's being told. We are literally looking at the living memories of past Autobot leaders. So this scene is canonical, and what we do see here actually happened. Now, the reality of this is ACOM probably just used the wrong animation models and coloring. We needed to depict characters building Megatron, so of course we're going to use the Decepticons that are known for building things. And this might not even be an animation gaffe, this might be completely intentional. In order to convey to the audience, this is what is going on. Megatron was built. So this might be an accident, this might not be. It's kind of weird how this works out. Now, from here on out, we have to start connecting dots. And we have to do what the writers for Takara do in order to explain the craziness of the fiction. And that is to find every little gaffe, every little bit of wiggle room that we can find in order to figure out how we can tie all of this together. So even the smallest little nuance might be the key to actually putting all of this into one piece. In this case, I'm looking at the character models. And yes, some of them are somewhat close to how the Constructicons look in most episodes. However, most of them are off-model. in particular, the heads. We have very unusual head shapes on some of these Constructicons that absolutely do not match the existing ones on Earth. So when I look at this, it puts it in my mind that Constructicons may not be just one group of Decepticons made up of 6. There's 8 depicted here. So it might not have been that simple. It might have actually been something of a group of different Transformers who just happened to be construction workers and builders. In this case, the green coloration might be Cybertron's way of denoting caution or warning, the same way that construction workers typically look the same on Earth, with bright yellow helmet and bright green safety vests. This is the common depiction of someone who is, in construction here on Earth. I go with this photo mostly because it makes me laugh, because I'm sure this is not a very bad Photoshop of all of these little bits onto a stock photo of a child. No. I'm sure he is actually wearing that and holding the drill absolutely incorrectly. This is a real photo. It's a real photo. Don't question it. But as example, so we could just have a common color for that particular role on Cybertron. It might just be common that they are green. And we do have connecting fiction that does kind of support the idea of more Constructicons than just the core team. And we saw it in the very first episode. Now, this does get explained later on, so technically it doesn't play in, but because it is part of the original cartoon, we do have a way of counting it at least a little bit. And that is when we bring up Hauler. So Hauler is an error in the original episode of Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye Part 1. Because originally the crane truck that we now call Grapple was destined to be one of the first year figures. It's why they did something kind of rare amongst Autobots and released the same mold twice in the same year with Inferno and Grapple. Typically, Autobots, they reserve that for just a couple of characters: Ironhide and Ratchet, Blue Streak and Prowl. But in year 2, they didn't really do that much of that, except in this case, because that was not the original intention. So Hauler eventually gets explained as a rogue Constructicon, someone who used to be part of that team. Might have been someone in that scene of 8. We don't know. But it does lend itself to the idea that, there might be just one group of particular type of Transformer that just deals in construction stuff. And it kind of makes sense if you look at the origin of Transformers. So if we go back to 5 Faces of Darkness Part 4 again, we have military hardware and consumer goods. Now, if you look at construction vehicles and builders, you could see military usage out of the building aspect, but they're mostly construction workers, which you would think would be consumer goods. So it might be something that's a little bit of both, or it might be all consumer goods who eventually decided to go with the Decepticons. Either way, it's something where I can imagine what we call Constructicons now is something that could have been on both sides, or could have been neutral and decided the different sides, which would explain the ones that are building Megatron in 5 Faces of Darkness, and why the ones in The Secret of Omega Supreme are friendly toward Omega. It's just who they decided. So we actually do have to use Road Hauler, as we know him now, as something of a weird link to kind of confirm this, even though his explanation fiction came later. But it does at least show that, yeah, there are construction workers who used to be Constructicons, which lends the fact to the idea that there's definitely more than just 6. So, with all that in place, how does this actually work out? How do we actually connect all these weird dots? Well, okay. So let us go with the idea that that Constructicons are just a thing on Cybertron, and some of them side with Autobots, some are side with Decepticon, or are completely neutral. So that would explain why the 2 different groups exist in the flashback scenes that we have, and then of course, the 6 that we know are the ones under Megatron's direct control thanks to the Robo Smasher. This is the group that we need to focus on because they seem to be the last bearing of the original style of Constructicon. Now, in story, Omega Supreme battles Devastator. Crystal City gets destroyed. So does the Robo Smasher, though. And everything that comes after is kind of fluid. So Omega describes that he came to Earth because he was chasing after the Constructicons, who were flying to Earth in a rocket of their own. However, Omega doesn't appear until Season 2, even though the Constructicons appear in Season 1. So what's happened to Omega in all that time? So the best explanation that I can have is that if he really was chasing the Constructicons through space, it is possible that they actually did get into a conflict while flying toward Earth. In that case, Omega might have been able to actually shoot down the Constructicons and actually cause them to crash land on Earth. From here, Omega may have returned to Cybertron thinking his revenge was complete, or he may have joined Optimus Prime and the Autobots on Earth and then went into a hibernation mode. And for Omega Supreme, that's actually very likely. Outside of the Secret of Omega Supreme episode, it's actually pretty common for him to have moments of very low power, especially when he has to fly everyone to Cybertron. It was a common way of writing him out of the episode because his energon was depleted and he had to recover. But it could also serve an explanation as to why he would be on Earth but not be aware of the Constructicons until later. That, or yes, he returned to Cybertron and only returned to Earth when he found out the Constructicons survived. So that brings the question, how do the Constructicons survive, and how does Megatron describe them as it was worth building them in these caverns? So for that explanation, we have to go to a completely different episode that I haven't even touched on yet. And in that episode is Starscream's Brigade. Here we actually find out that you can remove and store the personality component of a Transformer, essentially their spark. For lack of better terms, because we didn't have the term then, but you could transplant the personality core into a new body. Starscream did it with a bunch of Earth vehicles left over from World War II, and a space shuttle that ended up on the island for some reason. Point being, it is possible to convert Earth vehicles into Transformers as long as you have the personality core to implant into the newly finished bodies. So the building that Megatron refers to could have been the rebuilding of the Constructicons on Earth after the wreckage was found and their personality cores were retrieved. So that would actually explain how they were built on Earth, because technically they were rebuilt there. And from there on, you kind of just get this weird little amalgamous thing where the Constructicons appear, but Omega doesn't always. So you could kind of go with the idea that Omega Supreme put his vengeance aside after Optimus Prime's words convinced him otherwise, and he never really went after the Constructicons again. Like as far as he was concerned, the grudge was finished. And then the Constructicons continue to appear in order to sell more toys, because that was a popular set of figures, and continually get weaker and weaker as other combiners start taking priority. Once we get to Carnage in C minor and the Constructicons can be defeated with one shot from Perceptor, it's kind of the bottom of the barrel. But that is how I would put the whole thing together, using those little tiny bits that we have here and there in order to explain what is going on. So that's basically the long and short of it. The 5 Faces of Darkness Constructicons are not the 6 that we know because they're off model. The 6 that we know are the ones that hold over because they're under Megatron's control, and they get rebuilt on Earth after Omega shoots them out of the sky. That's the long and short of it. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know, because I know everyone's got their own fan theory about how this whole thing works. If you've got a theory, please let me know in the description. If yours was close to mine, please let me know, because I know this can't be a common thread. This can't be like an uncommon idea. So let me know. I'm looking forward to it. And as always, I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy.
Of course it would be
Got
the
it.
freaking elves
Cool.
that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.